Revenge office stories. Let me paint you a picture. The boardroom was packed, and it was so quiet you could feel the cold hum of the air conditioning. My team lead, Mark, was at the front, getting ready to present. He had this huge, confident smile plastered on his face, the same smile he always had right before he took credit for someone else's work. And this time that work was mine. The code he was about to demo, the project he was calling his own big breakthrough. I had bled for that project over the last 6 months. He clicked to the first slide, and his voice boomed with this fake authority. He was looking out at the entire executive board, the CEO, and a few of my shell-shocked teammates. He had no clue he was actually demoing his own termination. He had no idea that the quiet senior developer in the back, the woman whose code he'd stolen just hours ago, had been made the new chief technology officer that very morning. And he was about to be the subject of my first official executive order. It all went down at a company called Innovatech Dynamics. It was one of those places that called itself cutting edge, but was stuck in the 90s when it came to office politics. My name's Elena. I was 38 at the time, a senior software engineer, and I'd been with the company for over a decade. In tech, that basically makes you a fossil. I wasn't a flashy code ninja or a DevOps rock star. I was quiet, consistent, and damn good at my job. I had this naive idea that my work should just speak for itself. You know the type. I was the one they called when systems were burning down at 3 a.m. I was the one who would dig into ancient legacy code that nobody else wanted to touch. I was reliable. And in the corporate world, reliable often just means invisible. My team lead, Mark, was my complete opposite. All style, zero substance. He had the firm handshake, the perfect smile, and this uncanny ability to pop up at just the right moment to take credit for a win. He talked in a waterfall of buzzwords, synergy, optimization, paradigm shifts. But if you ever asked him to explain how the code actually worked, he'd just smile, deflect, and change the subject. He was a corporate magician, brilliant at creating illusions. He managed up, charming all the executives into thinking he was a genius, when really he was just a parasite feeding off the talent of his team. We'd clashed before, of course. Little things. A function I'd written would magically show up in his weekly report as a solution I implemented over the weekend. An all-nighter I pulled to fix a critical bug would be casually mentioned in a meeting as something I hammered out this morning. Every time it happened, I'd feel that sting of anger, but I let it go. What was the point of confronting him? He'd just gaslight you and somehow twist it to make you look like you weren't a team player. So I learned to pick my battles. I kept my head down, documented everything, and just focused on the work. And then came the Odyssey project. Odyssey wasn't just another project. It was the company's moonshot. The goal was to build a revolutionary data processing engine from scratch. If we pulled it off, it would slash our server costs by nearly 40% and leave our competitors in the dust. It was huge, and the CEO, Mr. Harrison, was watching it personally. I jumped at the chance to work on it. This was the kind of deep, messy, complex problem I loved to solve. For 6 months, Odyssey was my entire life. I wasn't just coding, I was architecting the whole thing. I spent countless nights, fueled by bad coffee, digging through academic papers on data compression and algorithms. My social life? Gone. My apartment looked like a recycling center for takeout containers. The rest of the team was great, but the core of the engine, the central piece of logic that made the whole thing tick, that was mine. The breakthrough came around 2 a.m. one Tuesday. I'd been stuck for weeks on this one persistent memory leak, and the solution just hit me. It was a really counterintuitive approach using a recursive function that went against all our normal best practices. But I just knew it would work. I coded a quick proof of concept, ran the tests, and the results were incredible. This wasn't a small fix, it was a quantum leap. The engine was faster and more stable than I'd ever hoped. That one block of code was the heart of the whole project. It was my masterpiece. I committed the code to a private branch on our Git repository, documenting every single line like my life depended on it. I wanted to run a few more stress tests before I merged it into the main project for everyone else to see. I went to bed that night feeling genuinely proud, that pure satisfaction you only get from cracking a really tough problem. The next morning, I walked into the office feeling great. The final demo for the exec board was in 2 days, and I knew we were going to kill it. But as I got to my desk, I saw Mark huddled with 2 junior devs, pointing at his screen. He had that smug, I own this look on his face, and a knot of dread formed in my stomach. "Morning, Elena," he said, barely looking up. "Just walking the guys through the final architecture for Odyssey. Had a major breakthrough last night. Cracked that memory leak and boosted performance by another 15%. My blood ran cold. 15%? My fix was closer to 30%, but he was just making numbers up." "Oh," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "That's great. How'd you do it?" He just waved his hand dismissively. "Oh, it's pretty high-level stuff. Got into some complex recursive algorithms. I'll be doing a deep dive in the demo on Friday, so you'll see." I just stared at him, my heart hammering. Recursive algorithms, he said it. There was no way he could have come up with the same weird solution I did on his own. It was impossible. I sat down, my hand shaking a little, and pulled up the Git repository. And there it was, in the commit history at 4:15 a.m., just 2 hours after I'd committed my code to my private branch, was a new commit on the main branch. The author, Mark. The commit message: finalized core engine logic and implemented major performance enhancements. I clicked to see the changes. It was like a punch to the gut. He didn't just steal the idea, he stole the literal code. He had gone into my private branch, which, as a team lead, he technically could do, but it was a massive breach of trust, and just copied my entire module. He didn't even bother to change the variable names or the detailed comments I wrote. He just copy-pasted my work, my soul, and signed his name to it. Then I saw he deleted my private branch to cover his tracks. But he was sloppy. He didn't realize that Git logs everything, that even deleted branches can be recovered. He'd left a trail of digital breadcrumbs a first-year intern could follow. The theft was just absolute. For a minute, I just sat there, staring at the screen, and this white-hot rage started to build. This wasn't just a stolen function. This was 6 months of my life, and he took it without a second thought. But here's what Mark didn't know. While he was busy practicing the presentation for my code, I got a calendar invite from the CEO's assistant. The title was just Meeting with Mr. Harrison. Location: the main executive boardroom. That was it. My first thought was pure panic. A summons like that usually means you're in trouble. Did Mark complain about me already? Was I about to get a lecture on not being a team player? My mind was racing as I made the long walk to the top floor, a walk we engineers called the Green Mile. The executive wing was like a different planet. The carpets were thicker, the air was quieter, and the art on the walls was real. I pushed open the heavy oak doors, and my anxiety shot through the roof. It wasn't just Mr. Harrison. The entire executive board was there. Our current CTO, David, was there too, but he looked surprisingly relaxed and even gave me a warm smile. "Elena, thank you for coming. Please have a seat," Mr. Harrison said, his voice totally calm. He was an older guy, known for being sharp, fair, and having zero patience for corporate BS. I sat down, feeling completely out of place in my normal work clothes in a room full of expensive suits. "Elena," he started, getting right to it, "we've been watching you for a while. Not just your work on Odyssey, which has been brilliant, by the way. We've seen your contributions, your leadership during that server crisis last quarter, the detailed documentation you provide. You don't just write code, you solve problems. You build things that last." He paused, and I was just stunned into silence. I thought I was totally invisible to these people. "As you might know," he went on, "David has been planning his retirement. Finding his replacement has been our top priority for the last 6 months. We interviewed dozens of external candidates, big names from big companies, but none of them had what we were really looking for. He leaned forward, looking right at me. We're not just looking for a manager, Elena. We're looking for a technical visionary, someone who gets our systems from the ground up, someone who commands respect through competence, not just a title. The board has reached a unanimous decision. We would like to offer you the position of Chief Technology Officer, effective immediately. The room was dead silent. I'm pretty sure my mouth was hanging open. CTO? Me. The thought hadn't even been in my wildest dreams. I was a 38-year-old developer who'd been a loyal foot soldier for a decade. For a woman in tech, especially one who doesn't play the self-promotion game, the path to the C-suite feels blocked by a wall of men. Men just like Mark. David, the outgoing CTO, spoke up. Elena, I'm the one who put your name forward. I've seen your work. You have the respect of the engineers, the ones who actually do the work. This company needs your leadership. It all hit me at once. Shock, disbelief, this incredible feeling of validation, and then a single cold, clear thought. Asterisk mark. The stolen code. The demo on Friday. Asterisk. I took a deep breath. My mind was suddenly crystal clear. The rage was still there, but it wasn't hot and blinding anymore. It was turning into something cold, hard, and sharp. It was turning into a plan. Mr. Harrison, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm honored. I accept. He broke into a huge smile. Excellent. We'll handle the public announcement next week. For now, it's confidential. Which brings us to the Odyssey demo. We're all very excited to see it. This was it, the moment of truth. The old me would have just laid it all out, the Git logs, the evidence, everything. But the new me, the CTO, saw the bigger picture. A public fight over code would be messy and make me look petty on my first day. It wouldn't fix the culture that let people like Mark succeed. But a public display of authority? A calculated move that exposes a fraud and sets a new standard all at once? That was something else. About that demo, I started carefully. My team lead, Mark, is presenting. Mr. Harrison nodded. Yes, he's been keeping us updated. Seems very confident. He is, I said with just a hint of a smile. I think it's best we let his presentation go on as planned. I think it will be very illuminating. For everyone. Mr. Harrison, sharp as ever, picked up on my tone. He looked at me for a second, and I could see a flicker of understanding in his eyes. He didn't know the details, but he knew something was up. And since he'd just made me his new CTO, he trusted my judgment. All right, Elena, he said slowly, giving me a tiny nod. We'll let it play out. Welcome aboard. I walked out of that room a different person. The anxiety was gone, replaced by this icy calm. The plan was bold, it was risky, and it was terrifying. But it was also perfect. Mark wasn't just going to be exposed. He was going to write his own downfall, live, in front of the most powerful people in the company. He was going to build the stage, turn on the spotlight, and hand me the mic. And I was about to give a performance no one at Innovatech Dynamics would ever forget. So, 2 days later, there I was sitting in the back of that same boardroom. But this time, I wasn't the scared developer. I was the predator, watching my prey walk right into a trap he'd set for himself. I got there early and picked a seat in the corner, trying to be as unnoticeable as possible. The other developers from my team came in, all nervous and excited. They gave me these little sympathetic smiles, knowing how much work I'd put into Odyssey. They had no idea. The executives filed in, and then Mr. Harrison. He caught my eye as he sat down and gave me that same tiny nod. The stage was set. Finally, Mark strode in, practically radiating obnoxious self-confidence. He was wearing a brand new suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and greeting all the execs like they were his best friends. He didn't even look at me. To him, I was just part of the furniture. Good morning, everyone, he boomed. Today, I'm thrilled to present the culmination of 6 months of intensive work. Project Odyssey is not just an upgrade, it is a paradigm shift. He clicked to his first slide. It was one of my diagrams. He launched into this rehearsed speech, a beautiful symphony of nothing. He talked about synergizing data streams and leveraging next-gen architecture. It was masterful, really. I just watched, my heart beating slow and steady. I let him go on. I wanted him to get comfortable. I needed him at the absolute peak of his arrogance for the fall to be as spectacular as possible. He got through the intro and moved to the main event, the technical deep dive. My deep dive. The real magic of Odyssey, he announced, gesturing to a slide with my recursive algorithm, is in the core processing engine. We faced a huge challenge with a memory leak. After weeks of trying, I had a breakthrough. I decided to pivot to a highly complex, recursive pattern. It was a risk, but the results speak for themselves. He switched to a live demo, ran a test script, and my numbers flashed on the screen. Processing time slashed, server load minimal. My results. The room was buzzing. One of the board members, Mr. Jennings, said, "Incredible work, Mark. Truly incredible." Mark beamed. "Thank you, sir. It was a team effort, of course, but I'm proud of the architecture I was able to design." That was my cue. I stood up. The sound of my chair scraping the floor echoed in the silent room. Every single head turned to look at the anonymous developer in the corner. Mark's smile faltered. "Mark, that's a fascinating presentation," I said, my voice carrying across the room, perfectly calm and clear. "The results are impressive." I started walking, slowly toward the front. "Thank you, Elena," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "We can hold questions till the end." "I just have 1 or 2 quick technical questions," I said, stopping right next to him. "Since you designed this, I'm sure you can clear it up. Could you explain why you chose a recursive function here, instead of a more standard iterative loop? What specific memory leak issue does that choice prevent?" Silence. It was a simple question. For the person who wrote the code, the answer is second nature. For fraud, it's an impossible test. Mark's face went blank. The confident smile was gone, replaced by a deer-in-the-headlights stare. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The recursion, he stammered, his eyes darting around. It's more elegant, more streamlined." He was just throwing words out, hoping something would stick. The executives started shifting in their seats. They didn't understand the code, but they understood incompetence. They could see the sweat on Mark's forehead. I pressed on, my voice still completely even. "And what about the fail-safe? The one that triggers a stack depth exception to prevent a crash if it hits a circular data reference? Could you point to that in the code on screen? It's pretty critical for stability." He was totally lost. He stared at the screen, at my code, like it was in a foreign language. The color drained from his face as the horror of the trap finally hit him. I let the silence hang there for a few painful seconds. Then I turned my back on him and faced the room. "Mr. Harrison, members of the board. As you know from our meeting on Wednesday, you appointed me the new Chief Technology Officer for Innovatech Dynamics." You could have heard a pin drop. Then came the gasps. My teammates looked like they'd seen a ghost. Mark swayed on his feet, his face just a mask of pure shock. His mouth opened and closed like a fish. I turned back to him, my voice now laced with ice. "And as my first executive order," I said, locking eyes with him, "I am taking over this presentation." I grabbed the remote and switched the screen to the Git repository logs I had ready to go. There it was on the massive screen for everyone to see. My commit at 2:07 a.m. with my detailed notes, and then his commit at 4:15 a.m., showing a direct copy and paste. And finally, the log showing him deleting my branch a minute later. It was an open and shut case, inarguable black and white. "Mark," I said, my voice dropping to almost a whisper, but it carried to every corner of that silent room. Your employment with Innovatech Dynamics is terminated, effective immediately, for gross professional misconduct and theft of intellectual property. I paused. Security is on their way to escort you out. Please hand over your company laptop and badge. Dead silence. No one moved. No one breathed. The only sound was the frantic, panicked breathing from the man standing next to me, who in just 5 minutes went from corporate hero to unemployed fraud. Mark just stood there, completely broken. All that arrogance had just evaporated, leaving this hollowed-out, defeated man. He looked at me, at Mr. Harrison, at the evidence on the screen. There was nothing to say, no lie he could spin. He had been so publicly and surgically dismantled. There was nothing left. Right on cue, 2 security guards walked in. They'd obviously been waiting outside. They walked up to Mark, and one held out a hand for his badge. With shaking fingers, Mark unclipped it and handed it over, along with his laptop. He didn't look at anyone. He just stared at the floor as they led him on a silent walk of shame out of the boardroom. The heavy doors clicked shut behind him. The silence that followed was heavy. The other developers were looking at me with a mix of awe and pure terror. The executives were just staring, processing the sheer brutality of what they'd just seen. Then Mr. Harrison did something that broke the tension. He started clapping. Not loud applause, but a slow, deliberate clap of respect. One by one, the rest of the board joined in. It wasn't just for the drama, it was an endorsement. A painful but necessary act of leadership had just happened. I turned to my stunned teammates. Their faces were pale. I know this was unorthodox, I said, my voice softening. But let me be perfectly clear. This is not how we're going to operate. The culture that lets someone like Mark climb the ladder by stealing from others ends today. Integrity, collaboration, and respect for each other's work are the new standard. There is zero tolerance for credit stealing or any behavior that breaks the trust we need to have in each other. I walked back to the front of the room and picked up the remote. Now, I said, my voice firm and confident, let's start over. My name is Elena. I'm your new CTO. And this, I said, clicking back to the live demo, is the real Odyssey project. Let me walk you through how it actually works. And I did. For the next hour, I explained the code, the real challenges, the real solutions. I answered every single question with the depth and clarity that only the true author could. It wasn't a demo anymore. It was a declaration. It was the first day of a new era at Innovatech Dynamics. My first week as CTO was a blur. The story of Mark's mid-demo firing spread through the company like a legend. But I didn't have time to dwell on it. I had a department to run and a toxic culture to fix. My first official act was to create what I called the Innovatech Integrity Protocol. It wasn't just corporate fluff. It was a real framework for how we handle our work, with strict rules for code ownership, mandatory code reviews, and a formal process for demo approvals to make sure the person presenting actually did the work. It was about creating a system where another Mark couldn't just slide through the cracks. It made it clear that while projects are a team effort, individual contributions will be tracked and respected. I spent the rest of the week in one-on-one meetings with every single engineer. I didn't want to just be their boss. I wanted to be their leader. I listened to their frustrations and their ideas. So many of them had their own Mark stories, times they were overlooked or had their ideas stolen. For the first time, they had a leader who actually got it, who had lived it. I made it clear that my door was always open, and that from now on, competence, not charisma, was how you'd get ahead in my department. My second move was promoting the most talented senior dev from the Odyssey team, a brilliant but quiet woman named Sarah, to be the new team lead. The message was loud and clear. Do good work, and you will be recognized. This whole thing taught me a huge lesson. For years, I thought hard work was enough. I was wrong. Being good at your job is essential, but it can't defend itself. You have to document your work, protect it, and sometimes you have to be willing to play the game. But you don't have to play by the same dirty rules as everyone else. The best revenge isn't getting angry and yelling. It's being strategic. It's about outsmarting your opponent, using their own arrogance against them, and turning a moment of betrayal into a chance to change the whole system. I didn't just get my credit back. I took the power to make sure what happened to me would never happen to anyone else in my company again. And that felt a whole lot better than just getting a thief fired. And that's the story. It was a wild ride, and it completely changed how I see the corporate world. It taught me that sometimes the quietest person in the room can make the most noise. You just have to pick your moment. I'm sure a lot of you have been through something similar. We've all had that boss or coworker try to take credit for our work. So, I want to hear from you. What's the most outrageous thing someone has ever tried to claim as their own? Drop it in the comments below. I promise I read them, and honestly, there's a weird kind of comfort in knowing you're not alone in this. If you liked this story and want to hear more about navigating the corporate jungle, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. It really helps me know you want more stories like this. Thanks for watching.